A new viral illness found in China is yet another hard to predict threat. First it was the Rona, and then Mpox, next polio, and now this. Recent news headlines warned of yet another possible threat from eastern China. The Lanya virus is causing people to become sick and ill. And this is posing the question that is being asked by so many, which is, why are so many infections appearing so quickly? So, some scientists believe a globally warmed and densely populated world is more hospitable to all sorts of new pathogens. And this may be part of why they're trying to thin the herd. But also that maybe new molecular technologies are allowing us only now to diagnose the cause of more and more of these outbreaks. Now, there is also a case for the increased distrust of science, which has led to huge pushback and refusals to prematurely wear Halloween masks and get the jabs and inject our bodies with potentially dangerous and unproven drugs that really seem to only benefit a select few. Pfizer being one of those beneficiaries, with some folks being bullied into bending their knee after being scared for their livelihood and backed into corners, forced to comply with the risk of rejection and opposition, causing financial burden, risking poverty and ostracization if they refused after having been backed into a corner. But I can tell you, I ain't the one. And I feel for you all who were left with a feeling of having little to no choice. We will continue to pray over these evil forces against us, and they will not get what they want. We will not let them win. God help us all. But where we go from here, the new world we will live in, is anybody's guess. And every day has its brutal lessons to be learned, which begs the question of, should we continue to blame and mistrust these MDs, doctors, and health experts and health officials, or are they actually doing the best they can? And instead, we should shift our blame towards the diseases themselves. But I suppose this may be a tall order and a big ask when you consider how many diseases have actually been created by scientists in labs like in Wuhan, China. But I digress. In a new legislative package signed into law by President Joe Biden on Tuesday, the bill, called the Inflation Reduction Act, still manages to give many Americans the finger as it falls short of applying cost controls to a broad range of the Medicare patient population who rely on insulin for their survival. The bill limits insulin copays to $35 per month for Medicare Part D beneficiaries starting in 2023. And most notably, seniors covered by Medicare also have a $2,000 annual out-of-pocket cap on Part D prescription drugs that won't start until 2025. And Medicare will also now have the ability to negotiate the cost of certain prescription drugs. But the changes fall short of the broader applicability to diabetes patients who are covered by private insurance. This new bill is a small victory, but there is still a lot more work that needs to be done. More than 8 million people in the U.S. rely on insulin to manage their blood glucose levels, and if they stop taking the medication for a few days, they could die. And as the year progresses, some Medicare patients are getting nervous about a coverage gap known as a donut hole and may be forced to try to ration their insulin just to get by. The American Diabetes Association plans to continue to advocate for relief for more patients, including the Insulin Act, which calls for capping monthly insulin costs for a broader patient population. And according to a recent research study from Yale University, the high cost of insulin related in 14% of patients having catastrophic levels of spending on their treatment. Now, this is a deadly serious concern. But what may be another big concern is the idea, in fact, that some have admitted the name Inflation Reduction Act was purely just a marketing ploy that helped get the bill passed. And it doesn't actually reduce inflation at all. And I have noticed that media outlets and news stations like MSNBC, ABC, and CNN only realized this after the massive spending package had already been signed into law. Man, they're sneaky. The bill passed the Senate earlier this month and the House last week, approving an estimated $437 billion, with $369 billion going towards investments in energy security and climate change. Democrats claim the legislation will soften the deficit by raising $737 billion imposing a 15% corporate minimum tax, which is predicted to raise $222 billion, and prescription drug pricing, which the Senate estimates will raise $265 billion. So, not sure if you guys are hearing that, but to me, this sounds like it's going to have the opposite effect of inflation reduction. But what do I know? But based on multiple analysis, the Congressional Budget Office said the bill is not expected to reduce inflation at all, and it will have a negligible effect, if any, on inflation in 2022. And in 2023, its impact would range between reducing inflation by 0.1% and possibly even increasing inflation by 0.1%. Splitting hairs here. But you give these jokers an inch and they'll take a mile. The liberal media networks just continue to push the narrative and gaslight Democrats into thinking this new legislation was going to be a big deal, and that if it passed, it would make Joe Biden an enormously consequential president whose legislative win would put him in the modern pantheon of great leaders. So number one, I don't think I would ever use the term great leader and Joe Biden in the same sentence. And number two, it all comes down to votes, control, and money. And I hope you guys can see that. They blatantly lied to everyone. With less than a week before the bill was signed, NBC Nightly News hyped the Inflation Reduction Act as a blockbuster billion-dollar deal with unprecedented investments in energy that will put downward pressure on inflation. Lip service. Before that, CNN newsroom host Pamela Brown claimed Biden was one of the legislative successful presidents in modern history, and then became confrontational with former Trump campaign advisor David Urban over the Inflation Reduction Act. But she knew she was just out there telling lies. But once the bill came into law, the liberal media suddenly began asking the tough questions, asking guests why the legislation was named the Inflation Reduction Act if it did not, in fact, reduce inflation. So I don't want you guys to be fooled here, okay? These are just more of the puppets in the show before the main act. And earlier this week on Tuesday, I saw a clip of CNN's New Day where CNN's Breonna Keller claimed that the passage of the bill was a significant victory for Biden's agenda and for his party, even if questions remain about whether it will live up to its name. So they're basically just admitting their falsehoods, but continuously pumping up Biden, his administration, and their agenda. And the best part about it all is they have no problem lying and deceiving their own to get more of what they want, which doesn't seem to actually help the people, us, the American people, the middle class, working class, the folks that need it the most. And I just don't understand how people can't see that, or maybe they just choose to ignore it. Jean-Pierre said the legislation would benefit Americans by making sure billionaires in corporate America pay their fair share, lowering the deficit and making the tax system more fair. But I don't know how many of y'all expect to see that actually happen, because there's a difference in tax evasion and tax avoidance. And these billionaire CEOs and mega corporations know all the tricks and loopholes. If you want to discuss this in further detail, contact me directly.